Collins & Co.'s not-for-profit conference, Be Empowered Through Knowledge, is designed specifically for the not-for-profit sector. Our speakers are experts in this sector, and their practical approach provides not-for-profit board members and management with the opportunity to improve their skills and knowledge across a range of specialist topics. The conference also provides a great networking opportunity.
Our last speaker in this session is Bianca Crocker. She's the woman behind Fish Community Solutions, a business that works with small and emerging not-for-profit organisations to build sustainable funding models so that it can create positive change in our world. In 2012, she was awarded the Fundraising Institute of Australia's Young Fundraiser of the Year and was a finalist in the Global Fundraiser of the Year Awards. So much of the focus in charity conversation today is about digital fundraising and social media, but it's important to remember that engaging people offline in real life can be a valuable too. Things like community events, peer-to-peer fundraising and crowdfunding are not only opportunities to fundraise for your cause, but excellent for friend raising. Discussing building your community, I'll hand you over to Bianca.
Hello again to some of you that may have been in the presentation earlier today as well. So thanks for the introduction, and I usually end up being tight on time, so I'm just going to get straight into it today. This session's about building your community, and as was mentioned, we often talk a lot about digital fundraising, and this is how we can connect with people in real life as well, but we're also looking at community in general, so building that community and why it's important for your organisation. So we will focus a little bit on community events and peer-to-peer fundraising and crowdfunding. And peer-to-peer fundraising and crowdfunding, I know they're a lot about being online as well, but it's still that sense of creating community online rather than a one-on-one communications. Just going to turn this slightly. So hopefully the key learning outcomes from this session is that you'll understand why the community building is beneficial for your organisation and learn some key tips, like I said, around community events, peer-to-peer and crowdfunding. So building community and the work that we do in our non-profits is all about people. As the diagram shows us, we in our organisations have a governance structure. We'll have our staff. For not all organisations I know have staff as well, but if you're a fortunate organisation or a slightly larger organisation, you'll have staff. You have volunteers, and then you have donors. So that's a whole lot of different groups of people that are coming together to support your cause, and then they're sitting in an environment of your overall community as well. So fundraising and successful fundraising is actually all about people, and as much as the digital space is really important, we don't want to forget about that aspect of people. So engagement with prospects and donors is really, really critical in all of your different types of fundraising or the work that you do at your organisation. Building community is also important because it builds connection. And when people feel connected to your brand and to your organisation and to the work that you do, they're more likely to stick around and to support you for a longer period of time and those sorts of things. Generally speaking, if you reach more people, you're likely to raise more money. And it doesn't always eventuate out that way at the outset. Might be a longer period of time, but generally speaking, if you can reach to more people, you will be able to raise more money. And as we've already touched on, digital is important, but IRL, as the young people are saying these days, in real life, is also really important too. So building your community is critical. Community fundraising is a great way to foster community spirit. And at the end of the day, the work that we're doing in our organisations is about that community spirit. We do want people to feel part of a group. We do want them to feel like we are all working together for a collective cause or a collective mission that we're working on. Community is important because it grows your organisational profile, and I'll touch on a bit of that brand building stuff in a moment. It enables you to connect with new people, which is really, really important. And some of the things that we'll talk about today, the different fundraising activities and things, are all ways that you can connect with new people. Once you've connected with these new people, hopefully then we're able to start them on the donor journey. And there's a thing called the donor pyramid, which is a fundraising tool or a fundraising model that you may or may not have seen. But in its simplest form, that's it up there on the screen. So basically, it shows us in a simplistic way what the donor journey is about and how our donors support us and the level and the number of people that support in that space. So as you can see, we have prospects down the bottom, and that's the largest group. So we obviously would have, ideally, more prospects than we would have at the top. So, and as the donor, the higher the donor gets in the pyramid, the more value their gift is to us, with bequest sitting at the top as what we would call the ultimate gift. So what's really important for this, for all of this part, especially this, I mean, all of this stuff is dependent on this bottom piece here. The more people you have in this prospects piece at the bottom, the more chances are you're going to get people feeding into all those other areas. So that's why it's really important that we are doing this community fundraising and these community engagement activities, because it's helping us build that bottom piece of the pie, or not the pie, the pyramid. Different shape to a pie, sorry. Okay, so sometimes we think about building the community, we're thinking about fundraising, or are we talking about marketing? Are we talking about building our brand or raising the funds? Sometimes it can be hard because we need money to build brand or to do marketing, but most people would say you need a brand or some marketing ability to be able to attract the donations that you want as well. So it's a little bit of a catch-22. It's a little bit like the chicken and the egg, I often think of it. So it's hard to know which one you need to do first. The really great thing is the things that we're going to look at today have the ability to both build brand awareness for your organisation while working in the community, as well as raising some funds for your organisation too. So community fundraising can take many shapes and forms, as we've talked about. Community events, whether they're outdoor events or smaller intimate events, that's one sort of thing. And they can also be run by an organisation or third-party events, which I'll touch on shortly. There's do-it-yourself fundraising, peer-to-peer fundraising, and crowdfunding. And we'll be focusing on 3 of these today, which is the community events, peer-to-peer, and crowdfunding, as I said earlier. So with community events, I have a love-hate relationship with events. I understand that they are really valuable, but they still frustrate me to no end. I'm on the board of a small organisation, and it's quite a small organisation, so we're a working board. So one of my remits, understandably, is, oh, she's going to do the fundraising for us, which means I have to do events. And I tried to get out of doing events when I stopped doing that part in fundraising as jobs, because I had done a lot of that as well. So I'm back finding myself doing these sorts of things. And sometimes they are really, really hard work. Then, as it says there, they're not simple and they're not cheap usually, but they are really, really critical for most organisations to engage people. And they don't always have to be about fundraising, although that's the manner in which we're talking about them today. They will ideally build brand awareness. And so sometimes when you're running events, that's the tricky part you're not capturing. You're looking at, oh my God, we put all this work in, we did this event, we got X amount of dollars, doesn't really seem like it's worth the effort. So a lot of the time, really, really good brand building events get dropped because they're not being seen to be a good success with the dollar outcomes. So I think it's really important. I know it's a hard thing to measure, but it's really important to sort of set some objectives about what you're going to do or how you can look at the outcomes around building your brand. And like we said, we want to attract new supporters. So some examples of different community events, and they're quite varied up here. So obviously down the bottom here we've got RSPCA's Million Paws Walk, which I'm sure you've all heard of, possibly some of you have participated in it with your furry friends. I have done it once or twice many moons ago, but that's a huge organisation and it's a huge event as well. But that's just one type of community event. In Tasmania, they have the Walk for Brain Cancer. That's a reasonable sized event as well. People doing things, walking together in the community. And up the top are two other different events. That one up the right is the board that I'm on the charity of. So we have a Sydney committee and they organise, basically it's an intimate dinner. It's about 100 or 120 people that gather at a golf club and we raise some money, have international speakers. We do international development. So we have someone from our programs come over and often will speak. And then the one up the top left is for an organisation called TLC for Kids, you may know. But that is the Daylesford Polo. So there's an organisation that have started an event, which I think it's on in a few weeks, the Daylesford Polo, and that's to support the TLC for Kids. So that sort of an event is what we would call a third-party event. They're great events to do because if you've got someone else that's going to do your event, you can kind of just piggyback on it. But it's trickier to get people to say yes, they'll do that for you. But again, you never know. A story just on that charity, Indigo Foundation, where I'm on the board, our chair went over to India actually late last year and was looking at some of the projects and talking to some of the workers in the space where we work, and she was so moved and so motivated by some of the things that she saw. She came back and she went out to dinner with her husband 2 or 3 days after she was back, and she was telling him some stuff, and the owner of the restaurant heard her and then was asking questions, and then because she was so energised, he was motivated, and then he said, oh, well, I'll put on a dinner. I think we need to do something. We need to raise you more money. So he put on a dinner in his restaurant, which was just a few weeks ago, I think, in Canberra, and I think they raised $8,000, which was amazing. And then I'm trying to run other events, and sometimes we struggle to raise $5,000. And I'm like, how did this dude, who doesn't know anything about fundraising, just come along and raise $8,000? But it's the point of it is really about trying to talk to people and try and get the support you can wherever you can. So some of my top tips for these community events, and it does depend a little bit on what community event you are going to do. But the key one is allow suitable planning time. Anyone who's ever done any event probably always thinks the day before their event, we should have started planning this a lot earlier. I feel like we don't have enough time. So that, depending on the size of the event, I'd say maybe 6 to 12 months at least to start planning. And obviously you don't need planning meetings weekly at the 12-month mark. But as the time gets closer, you might want to put things in there. And even if it's just 12 months out, you're having 1 or 2 meetings a month, or maybe even just once a month for the 12th, 11th and 10th month in the lead in, just to make sure it's on your agenda as things to do. Make sure you set your objectives. So as I said earlier, that's just not dollars objectives. Try and think about how many people do we want to reach with this event. And it could be that you measure how many new people that we haven't heard of before are coming along and learning about our organisation in this way. Consider the target market and the suitability of the type of event. This is really important. I might work with a small organisation and they'll say, oh, the board really wants us to do a gala ball. And I said, that's fabulous. I love that boards have those suggestions. Because most organisations don't necessarily have the database or the target, the target group that are A, going to sell tickets to come to a gala ball, or B, able to afford tickets to go to a gala ball. So it's really important that you think about what you're doing as an organisation and what's appropriate and a good fit for your organisation. Where possible, try and have a point of difference. This one's trickier. The events that we do for Indigo Foundation, I know none of them are here, so I can say this, but I don't really think they have a point of difference in terms of what we do. It's a dinner, we have a speaker, and we're quite a niche little organisation and have a good group of committed supporters that we're trying to grow. But where possible, and I think that is sometimes hard to have a point of difference, but where you can have a point of difference, you will really cut through to potentially bringing new people into your organisation. And that's the bit that's really important. Rally your volunteers sooner rather than later. Again, if you're doing a 12-month or 9 or 6 month plan towards an event, make sure you get your volunteers involved as early as possible. And one of the reasons for that is, I think Jamie mentioned it earlier, talking about her digital fundraising, but involvement is really important. And that's with all of the work that we do. If we can involve people in the process, whether it's our supporters or our volunteers, they're more likely to be, to have a buy-in to what we're doing and really want to achieve some success with us. Make sure you set yourself a budget and you know what it is, and then that's sort of goes without saying, but sometimes people sort of work a bit backwards from that, but it's really important to try and understand what budget you have to play with at the outset. And then market. Try and think of all the different ways you can promote, obviously, through your social media or your newsletters, and other potential partners that you might be able to collaborate who can share about what you're doing. This last tip here is, I think, a really important one that is often forgotten, and it's about the follow-up. So what do we do after the event? So aside from crash in a big heap, because that's usually the first thing that happens. So because I know you all crash in a big heap after the event, and I know that from personal experience, that's why it's important that you plan what you're going to do for your follow-up. So in part of your 12 months of planning, it's really important to think, okay, how are we going to thank people after the event? Those sorts of letters or the emails, you can have all them roughly pre-written. You can fill in the gaps about some of the highlights of the night, but generally that's what you can sort of do. You can do all those things beforehand as much as you can. You might be able to even schedule a couple of social media posts. They can be a little bit generic, obviously, but about saying thank you and things like that as well. And also how you're going to follow up new people or donors, and think about not just saying thank you, but how are you going to potentially continue to, or try to continue to engage them after the event. So that tip I think is really important, because the more follow-up you do and the better you leverage the outcomes of your event actually makes the event more valuable. So it's that whole, what we were saying before, it's not just always the dollars. But if you don't do any of this stuff at the end, then the value of your event has dropped significantly. Okay, on to peer-to-peer fundraising. So most of you probably know about peer-to-peer fundraising. It's not really something that I would need to explain too much of, but it's basically where you have individuals out acting as champions on your behalf. It's a growing area of fundraising in Australia now, and it's quite popular. Obviously, they're seeking donations from their friends and families and supporters on behalf of your organisation. So in terms of brand building and growing your networks, this type of fundraising is obviously really, really good for that. A lot of the time, it's when participants or your fundraisers are participating in an event or a challenge or something that you might have planned for them as an event. So some of the benefits are these can be lower costs to run and operate. A lot of the time, a peer-to-peer event is not actually, not always, because for instance, some big fun runs, like the Bridge to Brisbane in Brisbane, and all of those sorts of bigger events can be seen as peer-to-peer events, and they're actually physical events that someone's organised. But you can also do a lot of peer-to-peer events that are more virtual based, or people are just doing the event or the activity in their own time. And we'll touch on a few of those in a moment. So in that regard, they can be a lot lower cost, which is good, especially if you're a smaller organisation. They really, really engage your supporters, because your supporters are actually out there advocating for you. So, and if they've chosen to do that, then they're already a step above somebody else who is interested in your organisation just a little bit, because they're saying, I'm interested in your organisation and I'm actually going to do something for you too. So it's a really great way to engage people. And builds that connection that I spoke about earlier. So really, really brings in the connections for people. Again, it's another way of building brand profile in your community, depending a little bit on what type of activity you do or what type of peer-to-peer functionality you have, but it's usually a great way to build profile too. And because it's your supporters using their networks, it's actually always opening up new networks for you. There's probably a bit of a debate going on around fundraising at the moment is, well, we can't get, so, if I do a fundraising event and I get 10 friends to support this charity, they're not really supporting that charity, they're supporting me. So this charity may struggle to get them as supporters or continued donors. So how much effort should we spend on this group of people? That's the bit that I think the world of charities and fundraising is probably debating a little bit. I know some organisations, the Royal Children's Hospital Foundation were doing some work on that quite significantly a couple of years ago. I'm not really sure where they got to, but I'm working on that group. But I mean, if nothing else, even if they don't become donors, that's another 10 people that you can share your message with and you can tell a story to. So, and that's more people knowing about your organisation. So, a couple of examples that we'll look at today for peer-to-peer fundraising. The first one is an organisation called One Girl, and their campaign is Do It in a Dress. So if you've heard me talk anywhere before, I talk about One Girl a lot. I'm fond of this organisation. They're a great little organisation based here in Melbourne. But they have a campaign called Do It in a Dress, which sometimes some people know the campaign because the campaign has got quite big in recent years and people don't necessarily know the organisation, which not sure if that's a great thing or a bad thing, but it's just something to be mindful of. So they started this campaign in 2011, and I actually helped them do some stuff with that sort of as a volunteer back then. And they had a Do It in a Dress week, and they raised about $36,000, which was huge. I think the whole organisation was raising about $40,000 at that point in life. So $36,000 was huge. And it was probably only raised from a small group of people that were raising maybe about $800 to $1,000 each. So there was some really good outcomes there. Today, though, this event, which is obviously only 8 or 9 years later, is raising, and I know that's quite a big range there, the 500 to 800,000, but over the last couple of years it's flipped a little bit, and they're looking at this. And so some of these stats were at a presentation that I went to recently when I had heard someone from the organisation speak, and I spoke to them about it afterwards and got some more details on that. But so I guess they're still considered a small organisation. So this fundraiser is their biggest thing that they do in terms of income, like other single source income. They probably, the year that they raised $800,000, they would have tipped over the $1 million mark, but I think they only just sit about there most of the time. So they're quite a small organisation. They've got a really small team as well. I think they've only got 8 staff. So some of the key tips that they suggested, and they've collated this from the different people that have worked with them over the time, is firstly, make sure your campaign has a really good fit with your organisation. And this is a little bit like I was saying before about the gala ball, but this part's really important because if you're doing something, it becomes more memorable for your participants, or it becomes a better experience for them to understand your cause or to connect with your cause if it's a really good fit. So in this case, having people, and a lot of blokes strangely end up doing this campaign, wearing a school dress because they're going to be raising money for girls in Africa to go to school, there's a really good link there. Like, it's a visual link, it's fun, it's silly, but it actually ties right back into the very cause of the very heart of what they do. Utilise your networks. As I said, they are really, two founders of this organisation and were in their mid-20s when they founded the organisation, so they're in their early 30s now. They have moved on from the organisation in terms of roles. So the CEO, Chantel Baxter, was one of the co-founders. She's no longer the CEO. But that was what the organisation probably needed as well. But they are still people really young and enthusiastic and really good at using their networks. And it also doesn't help that a lot of them will just wear school dresses all the time. Even the blokes that work in the organisation now just seem to wear school dresses because it creates conversation and it gets them talking to people. And the other thing that they think is a really important thing is to be able to bring people along that journey with you. So make sure you share. They are fabulous at telling stories, this organisation. So if, next time you're on your Facebook or something, I would highly recommend just following them on Facebook or something as just a, so let's see what this organisation does, because they're really good at telling stories about the women and girls that they, work with in Africa. And they have some really beautiful photographs of their work too. The other one I wanted to talk about today was Movember. Now I know that some people say, oh, Movember, don't talk about Movember, because they're like miles and leaps and bounds ahead of the rest of us, which is true. But they didn't start that way, and I think there's always really good stories that can be, or lessons that can be learned from just looking at what they are talking about and what they've been doing. So Movember began in 2003 with 30 friends who just, after a couple of blokes sat around in a bar, 30 friends grew moustaches, raised a little bit of money, which is not really that much. And I don't know how much money they raised in that first year. But today, they reach more than 5 million people have been inspired to join that global health movement for men across 20 countries, and they have funded more than 1,200 men's health projects, which is huge. But again, I know it's a little bit, the holy grail of fundraising or of peer-to-peer, but let's just break it down to what lessons can we take out of this. And this was, I went to a presentation recently and a fellow from Movember spoke super passionately about the organisation and the work, and some of his key tips and key takeaways were what I wanted to share with you. So the first one is that the power of Movember is in the community, and that the people that work in that organisation know that, and they say that. They understand that the power in what they do comes from the people that are in the community around them. So equipping those people to be able to do what they want them to do, to share the right messages, to grow the brand, to talk about men's health is really important. And the reason, I think Pamela spoke about this as well earlier this morning, but we all know when November's coming up, because all of a sudden every second bloke on the street's growing this little odd moustache or weird moustaches, but you don't even have to be fundraising, and it's bringing the attention of men's health to the forefront. So if this sort of stuff is generating more conversations among men about suicide and mental health, then that's a great thing. And prostate health. And they're doing a lot of work in that space now. So they're not just about fundraising, they're looking at ways that they can connect with the community to educate them in a way that's relevant to these younger men that most of their audience is. One term that the guy used in the session that I was at the other week was, he talked about rock stars and roadies. And I thought this was a really fabulous and fun way to talk about this sort of a target market. So basically they say that Movember, the people and the staff at Movember are the roadies. It's the people that do the fundraising for them that are the rock stars. And if anyone's ever had anything to do with a band, the roadies are the ones that do all the hard work, but the rock stars are all the ones that get the glory, which is fine, and that's what they want and that's what they encourage, because they know that they wouldn't be able to do it without that rock star at the front of the stage, effectively. So I thought that was a really fun way to look at it, and again, it fits in with their the way they market themselves and talk to the community as well. And the third point from Movember was really interesting, was that they were talking about that you can't be everything to everybody. So they obviously originally were sort of targeting younger men to do this campaign. They did stretch out into women, so they have their Mo Sisters, that's taken off a little bit. But then they did also try and do other things in other age groups with older men and things like that. And they just didn't have the same cut through that they had. So then they realised we can't actually be everything to everybody, and let's not try to do that. Let's just stick with this group that we know, and that's what they're doing now. So that's why they're now actually starting, rather than trying to grow where they're working with this group of younger males, and they're trying to learn different ways of connecting with them. A really interesting thing that they spoke about, which I didn't know, is they have because there's a lot of barber shops that pop up around the place nowadays. There's more barber shops in Melbourne, I think, recently than there has ever been, I'm not sure. But they have what they realised is they were trying to go out talking to barbers about trying to spread the word of Movember. And what they learnt from these conversations with the people in the community was that barbers sometimes felt ill-equipped, because a man will sit in the barber chair, and must be a lot like a hairdressing salon. You just sit down and then you spew out all this information that you didn't even think you wanted to tell anybody, but all of a sudden you're in the barber's chair or the hairdresser's salon, and you're telling them all of your biggest, deepest, darkest secrets and all of your problems. So the barbers were actually saying, this is what's happening and we don't know what to do with it. So what Movember did, they have piloted and funded a project where they've run some training around mental health assistance and things like that, so they can train the barbers just to have some, like, how can we deal with this? What can we say to these people? How can we work through it? How can we support them while we're really actually there to cut their hair or trim their beards? And then those barbers are having some sort of endorsement from Movember as a Movember approved, barber or something like that. So that's actually not about raising money at all. It's really just trying for them to work out what their niche is and trying to work with that target market and not be everything to everybody. A couple of other examples of peer-to-peer fundraising is, you probably heard of Dry July, so no drinking in July and you get people to sponsor you. Australia's Biggest Morning Tea is an interesting one because it's sort of a peer-to-peer event, but it's also sort of not, so that's probably not the best example I've ever given, so I apologise. The one that I do love is the MS Readathon. I think it's 30 years old. I did the MS Readathon as a kid. I didn't realise I was doing peer-to-peer. I just thought I was reading books and walking around and harassing my neighbours with a piece of paper so they could give me 20 cents a book. But that is, peer-to-peer fundraising in one of the oldest forms. So a few tips from peer-to-peer fundraising. Harness the power of online giving. So that's one of the benefits now. When I was doing the MS Readathon, there was no online giving. There was a lot of walking around the streets. But now you can use online platforms to support you in that space. Make sure you're empowering others. So give people the tools that they need to go out and do their fundraising. So if any of you have ever done any peer-to-peer activities yourself, you would know that it's important that you get a frequently asked questions pack or some tools and tips of how to do your fundraising and that motivation and support along the way. One of the things we did with one girl in that earlier years was part of the work that I did as a volunteer for them was to send out regular email communications to that small group of fundraisers. So we didn't do that in the first year because in the first year we just wanted it to be a week. But then what they learnt was everyone was just doing it whenever they wanted. So they have October as basically do it in a dress month. So we were just making sure we're sending out communications to people regularly. So we're giving them the tools that they need to feel empowered to go out and talk to others. Obviously, utilising social media is important. Motivating and encouraging your participants, again, through that personal connection is really good. Okay, and lastly, we're going to speak about crowdfunding. So most of you, again, probably know what crowdfunding is. It's not as new these days. To some organisations, still a little bit of a mystery. And some people, I know, some crowdfunding campaigns go super well and others completely flop. So I think we're still trying to work out, a good balance of how this works. So I'm going to share with you today a case study of a crowdfunding campaign that I've just worked on last month with a client, and I'll share you some of the successes that we had. So again, it's another type of fundraising, not strictly in the community fundraising arena, like I said, because it's mostly online, but it's still creating an online community. It's about raising funds through a group of individuals, which is the crowd. It's a really big, it's growing as a fundraising activity in Australia. And you have a number of online platforms. There's just 4 that I've mentioned there, but I'm pretty sure there's a couple of others as well these days. Just on the online platforms, what is important to remember is each of them have different mechanisms and how they work. So the main thing is some are, you get, I don't know what the term is that they use, I've forgotten it, but you get all of what you raise, or others you only get if you reach the target. So these are important things to look at before you choose your platform, because they are different depending on which one you go with. So the case study that I was going to share was some work that I've done with the Foster Care Association of Victoria. They're a reasonably small organisation, primarily government funded, but they still want to do a lot of stuff outside of their government funding. And if there's organisations here that have government funding, you'll know that obviously that's quite restrictive. So they're looking at ways of doing other things in the community. So they had a specific project that was that we worked on, and that was a Caring for the Carers campaign. So the Foster Care Association isn't really about the children. Their direct beneficiaries are the carers. So our foster carers, kinship carers, all of that sort of stuff. So we had a specific project, or they had a specific project that they wanted to raise funds for, which is really important, and it was something separate to the work that they were doing with their government funding, which is really critical as well. So they can be very clear about that message. We had to set an achievable target, and obviously something that was realistic. So for this organisation, we had a target of $10,000, which is a reasonable sized target for them, and it was actually going to enable us to do the project. So the project, the Caring for the Carers project, was about carers suffering from fatigue, burnout, and all those sorts of things. So what can we do to better support them on an emotional sort of level? And that's not what any of their government funding is about. Government funding stuff is about training and education and those sorts of things. So they had piloted last year a carers retreat, which was giving carers time out for one night away to connect with other carers, find themselves again, have time to rejuvenate themselves, and basically that was what we were raising money for. The campaign that we was raising money for, if we raised $10,000, we could have 10 carers go on this retreat. So that was basically the goal. A key to successful crowdfunding is you need your own crowd. And that, I think most people get that now, but early on in the crowdfunding game, that was, I think people didn't really understand that. I think a lot of people think sometimes you can get the crowd because you're on the Possible website or the Chuffed website and people go there, but that's not really true. You need your own crowd to be able to be successful in this space. So the Foster Care Association have over 5,800 likes on their Facebook page. So that was a really good place for us to start as well. And personal connections are really important. So having your board, senior management and staff send out personalised emails and those sorts of things to their own networks to share the campaign. And also they had some of the actual carers do that too. That's really important to be able to get that crowd engaged. So in terms of the online platform that we chose to use Chuffed. So and one of the main reasons are, there's a few reasons. They were very cost effective, we thought, in our analysis, and it's not an all or nothing. That was the word I was trying to think of before. They don't have an all or nothing mechanism, which an all or nothing means you need to raise all your target or you get nothing. So we were a little bit nervous because we were like, oh, what if we do this work and we raise $9,950, then we don't get any of it. So there are other platforms out there that they have the all or nothing mechanism. So Chuff doesn't. So we were happy about that and we chose to go with them. So this was the online platform. This is just a screenshot of the top of the page, as you can see. So you've got the name of the project up there, the organisation that's sharing it. That was our target of $10,000, which we, as you can see there, we were successful in. And you have a really good case for support that needs to be put up there. Or not a case for support, but a case. You need to tell your case. So as you can see there, this was our snapshot piece. Talked about carers needing help. They are the people that care for our community's most vulnerable children, and we need to be able to show that we care for them. That's effectively what that is. And then obviously on the website underneath this part, we had a whole lot more information that went into detail about that. So having that case there is really important so people understand why they should support you. Most online crowdfunding campaigns have what you would call rewards, and some organisations have really amazing and fabulous things to give away. We didn't really have a lot. So we did, I think if you gave a $25 donation, we would give you a shout out on social media. $50 donation, or maybe it was $100, got a certificate. Again, not that exciting, but we didn't have a lot to give away. $1,000 donation, they got an invite to the Carer Celebration, which is held in Foster Care Week. And it's usually held at Parliament House or somewhere a little bit fancy like that, so it's a nice thing. And if they gave over $2,000, they got to have lunch with Katie, the CEO of the organisation, who is, you can see up there. So they're not, so some people get stuck, oh, we don't have anything amazing to give away or any experiences. Just sometimes keep it simple. To be honest, the larger donations that we got that were over the $1,000, they actually ticked the box, they didn't want the reward anyway. So people generally don't do it for that, even though we spent half an hour trying to think of what we could give these people. But anyway, I'm not personally offended, it's fine. And then videos. Videos are really, really important. But again, this is an area where sometimes people get a bit nervous about. But I'm going to try, with my friend at the back of the room there, to share some of the videos with you, just because I want you to see them, and then I want to tell you a little bit about them.
Caring for carers is important. It's important that we all get involved. It's such an exciting program. It's exciting that we can celebrate carers, we can thank them for all they do, and most of all they can have an opportunity to revitalise themselves, meet like-minded people, have a long lunch or a weekend away and get back to doing the work that they do so well, supporting our kids. I'm Katie and I work at the Foster Care Association, and I love my job and I love working with carers, and I think the thought of celebrating carers, thanking them and giving them opportunities to spend time together, relax, learn, meet like-minded people is so exciting. I'm so excited about this project. Caring for carers is what we do at the Foster Care Association, and I'm excited that people can celebrate carers and help us. Thanks.
We might just show the second one of the next two, is that okay? Just in the interest of time. If you do want to see these videos, we did 7 videos throughout the campaign, and you go to the Foster Care Association's Facebook page, and you can find them all on there. The point that I was trying to make though is these were all 7 videos were filmed on an iPhone, super simple, and they were edited in iMovie. So they're not, and some of them were done by me, and I have absolutely no video editing skills whatsoever. So they're not the most amazing videos, but they don't need to be. If you're using them, like video, people watch them and then they go. Like, you don't want to be spending lots and lots of money on something that, people are just going to see for a day and then it's going to disappear. But the point is that video is king, and it's really engaging content to have on your social media and things to support these sorts of campaigns. So across the month, the videos that we shared were ones like this. We had some carers talking and different things like that. Then they were short. I think that one that you just saw was the longest, and it was just over a minute. So they were quite little, but they were engaging, and they got really good traction on social media. The other thing that's really important is where you can get some media support. So we were fortunate enough to get some support with local media. So the Wyndham Star Weekly shared this story about one of the carers, Sarah. So it told her story, and then at the bottom it sort of had some details about how people could support the campaign. And we also had one in the Dandenong Leader as well, which was great. Now, I don't know that any of these newspaper articles led to people donating, but it's all about that building that community again, sharing what the challenges are, sharing the cause as well. And that's all part of doing these community building events and things. So the outcomes, we raised 111% of the target, which was fabulous. So just over $11,000 through 73 supporters. We had really good engagement. We created a thing called $5 Friday, as you can see. And on Fridays, we just were really trying to encourage Facebook people just to get involved, because Facebook people don't always donate. And that actually, I think we got about 8 $5 donations. So that's not a lot, but for those people, it was the first time they'd donated. So that was good. We had individual donors, like I said. We did have a couple at 1,000, and we had a couple at 500, as well as all other amounts. We had one agency support us, which an agency is like one of the organisations that puts the young people with the foster carers. That was, as well as the money was great, that was really good for us to see that we obviously were being supported in the community. And so that in itself generated a bit of goodwill. And we had lots of positivity and buzz generated. We had so many positive comments through the Facebook and through the actual Chuffed online campaign as well, which, and a lot of them were from carers. So not people that were supporting the campaign, but carers that are members of the organisation, and just realising, hey, people out there do care about us, and they're out there doing something for us as well, which was really positive. So it was a really, really great outcome for the organisation. So I'm over time. So crowdfunding top tips. As I probably touched on all of these, you really need your own crowd. I think that's vital. Suits projects or one-off events, or one-off expense items, sorry. The planning is also important. While a crowdfunding campaign may only be 28 or 30 days or some finite time period, so ours ran through February, we were planning it in November, which we probably should have planned it a little bit earlier, but that was okay. Digital methods to connect people is really important, and the video is important, and the media. And I love Ken Burnett, so I always try and share some information from him. And he says fundraising isn't about asking for money, it's about inspiring people to believe that they can make a difference and then helping them make it. So by having these community events, by building that community, hopefully we can do that, and then people will support our organisations with some dollars as well. Any questions? Everyone probably wants to go because it's home time, because I'm over time again. Sorry, I really need to get better at keeping to my time segments, but I'm around if anyone wants to talk. And I'll just mention, in case you weren't here earlier, we've just launched the Small Non-Profits Alliance, and we're giving away an advanced membership, which is valued at $149. So if you sign up as a basic member by 5 o'clock tomorrow, on our website, smallnonprofits.com.au, we're choosing 2 people to win an upgrade to the advanced membership. And there's some information in your brochure, in your packs today about that. That's all. Sorry, that was a very quick wind up.